We have a lineup. The theme is because of this.
Welcome to ASU Cares Gather, a storytelling series where we believe everyone is a storyteller. With Gather, we seek to create a platform that facilitates the expansion and crafting of narratives that connect and inspire. The theme tonight is because of this, and we have a special guest host, the lovely Rachel Barkley, whose story told with Gather back in June. Now I give you Rachel. Enjoy the show.
Thank you, Christine and ASU Care. I'm so honored to be with this amazing group of storytellers tonight. I live in Washington, D.C., and the rest of our speakers are from all over the country. I'm a new disabled mother due to just weeks after I had my first baby. Sharing my story of survival and disability has opened up a world of deep connection with others, as well as healing for me. Professionally, I'm a public policy coalition builder. I was privileged to be a storyteller at Gather 3 in June. Our stories serve to inspire and connect one another, which is why I'm so pleased to host this esteemed group tonight. We have a great lineup of storytellers. Our theme is because of this. As usual, we have 3 storytellers sharing, and then we'll move to the Q&A portion of the evening, which is my favorite part. The stories tonight are thought-provoking. Be sure to stick around for the Q&A, which will take place after everyone tells their stories. This is your opportunity to see the storytellers speak candidly about their experiences and share your questions. During the show, show your love to the artist in the chat, and afterwards submit your questions there as well. Our first storyteller of the evening is Chris Burton. Chris is the Director of Equity and Inclusion at the Stony Brook School. Born and educated in Brooklyn, Burton is a writer for himself and others. He is a proud Davidson alum, received his Master's of Divinity from Union Presbytery Seminary, Master of Science in Education from St. John's University, and is back at Union for another degree as a Doctor of Ministry candidate. Burton has been podcasting since 2008. Sounds like he was an early adopter, and co-hosts a podcast about race, culture, and soul care called Cross Streets. His writing has been featured in Boom Shots, The Hill, Unbound, The Sports Fan Journal, and The Humankind Journal. Burton writes about Jamaican culture, music, sports, living with lupus, and his journey with God. You can find his writing, I hope I don't butcher this address, at lupusawadat.com. And now I give you Chris Burton.
From it a little bit, me afraid of backside. I summon him, me fears them. Backside! I must have something me and my grandma exclaim when she watch Walker, Charles Bronson, them sort of thing then. I first encountered backside when a neighbor came over to play hide and seek. My cousins were clever. They knew if I was it, all they had to do was hide in the basement, cause me nah venture down there. No, sir. As long as I wasn't it, everything would be fine. I could hide in my favorite spot and evade capture. First couple rounds went well. I wasn't it, and it took a while for me to get discovered. A couple times, I just rejoined everyone when I heard them outside. Too generous? Show off? Maybe. But somehow, it came to bump, and my hiding space was discovered. It's dangerous, you know. What? What's dangerous? For little boys to hide in the bathroom? Man, don't you know what's in there? Nah, man. What? What's in there? Clorox! Yeah, man. Clorox kills little boys, man. It'll find you and kill you. Boy, I'm just getting over that move with the wicked toilet. You know what I talk about? You that get potty trained and the satanic bowl will threaten to devour him. So I have to put on my iron shirt and conquer them devil. And look now. Look upon the tribulation of my so-called neighbor dropping on my life. This boy is anti-State Farm. Him could have never worked for Allstate. I was not in good hands. So my whole strategy changed now. Couldn't fathom returning to my trusted hiding place. As you can imagine, all proposed substitutions were lackluster. Was only a matter of time until I got caught and dreadfully became it. Enter the piranha then. Nothing more than my whatless cousins them strategize and all of them gather and hiding at the basement. So darkness enveloped the space in a matter undoubtedly analogous to the wickedness in them heart. I was Christopher, the beloved Tiffer, and I saw them do me, the bag of Judas on her. How would I manage? Will this game never end? You know, I should leave them in the abyss. Hunger soon bite them. Victory shall be mine. But I hindsight that. Strategy always sweeter in rear view. Common sense can't coexist with terror. See, terror is too expansive, metastasizes too quickly to allow judgment to run its course. This was not a real problem, but backside only let me see crisis. So we do nothing more than just ball. You ever cry so hard you feel so you just get baptized? I thought tears then would drown Noah and Gilgamesh. Them tears they would gentrify Aquaman yard. Me ball hysterically till me water about cousin them emerged from the pit, disfigured by hysteric fits. Me don't remember much more that cook out there, but the truth be told, me don't even remember me whatless neighbor. We didn't play much with me, feeling betrayed, and him perhaps disgusted by my cowardice. But the effects of his encounter fed backside enough. Soon I was afraid to use the downstairs bathroom or being alone at all. Before I was ready to do my business, I had to check if Clorox was in there. If it was, I'd fly upstairs. Sometimes the upstairs bathroom was occupied, and I'd pee-pee dance until I was free. A mark of my mother's love was her willingness to hurry up when I had to go. The sign of my grandma's love and sick sense of humor was sending me downstairs to use the bathroom anyway. I have a memory which I cannot distinguish if I lived or dreamed, but it has stayed with me so long that it is real enough. I'm downstairs by myself and ready to go upstairs when everything goes black on the staircase. I feel cold and numb, powerless. The staircase seems stories high, and I'm totally engulfed by backside. The currents led me to run upstairs whenever I could, much to the chagrin of Aunt Joan, who must have cringed when Muhammad Ali commanded, "Rumble, young man, rumble." "What you try doing? Brought down the whole house? Take time and walk." I was Peter, with no savior in sight to intercede as devils wait to sift me like wheat. Backside became omnipresent, the cold breath on my neck, the shadow in the corner of my eye, waiting to devour me in my next step. So much of backside was in my feeling. Aside from the Clorox debacle, there was no tangible form of backside. I don't even know what backside wanted, why he was chasing me, or what he would do if, once, he ever caught me.
Wow, thank you, Chris. I loved playing hide and seek as a kid, and I felt the visceral childhood fears I had as you told yours. I'm positive that people are frantically Googling some of the vocabulary you used. And I'd like to take this moment to repeat one of my favorite lines from your story. Common sense can't coexist with terror. Our next storyteller is Aaron Hopkins-Johnson. Aaron is an artist and a writer from Phoenix, Arizona. He has worked in lots of different jobs, identifies with skateboarding ethics, and returns to the power of language and books at the end of the day. He is the owner of Lawn Gnome Publishing and can be found at the Phoenix Poetry Slam. Take it away, Aaron.
I used the payphone to send 07734 to my girlfriend's pager and walked home. My parents had kids during the helicopter parent craze in the west side of Phoenix. I was raised to be resourceful and to make my own decisions. I clocked out at Arby's with my shell-toe Adidas and tube socks stinging with hot grease. It was summer in Phoenix, which meant the mile walk from her house seemed a little bit longer than usual. I made about an eighth of a mile when a gold sedan just pulled up right next to me. A tinted passenger window rolled down. I heard a stern voice, "Excuse me, do you need a ride?" I was taught at an early age not to talk to strangers. It had only been 5 years since one of my classmates was gunned down for not saying the right thing to a car that was passing him by late at night. He said, "It's okay. I'm one of the good guys." He pulled into the street as I tried to cross. A man about 10 years older than me got out of the car. Then he walked to the back of his vehicle, leaned against the trunk, crossed his legs, covered in blue slacks with red ribbon going down the sides. He wore a button-up khaki shirt pressed completely wrinkle-free. He lit up a cigarette, pushed the pack towards me, and asked, "Hey, you want one?" I declined, and he made small talk, asked me where I work, where do I live, how far do I have to walk, talked about how hot it was. I told him I had to hurry home. "Are you going to college?" he asked. I wish. In my family, you were lucky to graduate high school. He asked me if I ever thought about joining the military, and I told him that my grandfather, he was in the military, the Army. He asked me if I knew what kind of job I would have if I joined the military. I didn't know. "Ever thought about being a pilot?" I laughed. Me? He asked me a bunch of questions he probably knew I would say no to. Do you have a car? Are you in school? Are you enrolled in college? Have you ever flown in a plane? Have you traveled a lot? Do you like the band Candlebox? My imagination was running wild in my head. I was thinking about flying, having my own personal luggage and carry-on, going to any state or city I ever wanted to go to, going to any country I wanted to, trying different types of food, and getting out of the city that was in perpetual heat exhaustion. He said, "Why don't you let me pick you up tomorrow morning? We'll take a test, and after that, I'll be able to tell you what kind of job you can get. Hey, we might even be able to pay for your college. It's just a test, you know? You can always say no whenever you want." I couldn't say anything to that kind of logic, and I agreed to meet him the next morning at 8 a.m. He drove me to my girlfriend's house, and he said he'd see me at 8 a.m. and that he was going to bring coffee. And I said goodnight to Staff Sergeant Coppice. The next morning at 7:30 a.m., there was a knock on my girlfriend's door, and it was Staff Sergeant with the 2 cups of coffee. And he said, "Are you ready?" I grabbed the cup of coffee, sat in the gold sedan, and we drove downtown. We parked in front of a large stone building, and I walked past the American flag and another flag with a bunch of symbols I had never seen before. And I took an elevator up like 5 or 6 floors, and I walked into a room with a bunch of cubicles. And there were a group of young men just like me, ready to take a test. I sat down, I got my test, and I answered the questions, fitting shapes together, sticking gears in one another, building engines, filling in bubbles in my number 2 pencil. And it felt pretty good. I completed the test, gave it to another man in blue pants and a khaki shirt. I enjoyed an orange Gatorade and some cookies in the waiting room with other boys that just finished the test. The other boys were talking about how they're going to start boot camp, where they're going to be stationed, what branch of military they're going to serve in. I was just there to take a test and find out what kind of job I would have. I was taken into the gymnasium, stripped down, walked across a wood gymnasium floor while 5 men in lab coats watched. They measured my arms, looked up my nose, down my throat, into my ears. I did as many pull-ups as I could. I ran a mile under 8 minutes, and I did 100 sit-ups in about 1 minute and 10 seconds. Finally, all the boys were lined up in the hallway, and we were all so excited. Some said that they were going to have their parents waiting for them in the lobby. My parents didn't even know where I was. I don't even know where they were either. We were all taken to a room where the carpet was thick and red and had the seal of the United States printed on the middle. Flags bordering the walls echoed with mirrors. My spiked punk rock hair really stood out in this infinity loop of patriotism. We were standing about arm's length from one another in a perfect 8x8 square. 3 men wearing ceremonial Marine garb from head to toe walked in. We were told to raise our right hand, and one of the men started speaking. It was a speech, and it was one I've never heard before. I felt like I was being sworn into like a court TV show or something. After we said back the words that we were requested to, and we were congratulated because we are now in the Marines. Wait, what? A door opened and we were escorted out in a single file line down to the lobby where the other boys were meeting their parents and hugging them. Some boys comforting their crying parents. I looked for Staff Sergeant Coppice everywhere and I couldn't see him anywhere. Most of the other boys had duffel bags with them and they were being ushered into a shuttle van. And I made a beeline for the back of the line, slowly backed up into the crowd of crying family members until I was safe in the lobby restroom. I was shaken in a stall for about 15 minutes. What did I do? How did this happen to me? I finally got the courage to walk in the lobby and it looked like the shuttle was gone. With my head down, I walked out of the lobby, out into the street, and waited for the city bus. After 2 hours of transfers and walking, I made it back home on the west side and got ready for my second job, which was at a retail athletic shoe store in a mall. I told my boss that I was going to be a Marine and that I may have ditched before going to boot camp. You what? He could not believe my story that I just told him. He sat me down in the office and he told me that I am going to college, that I'm not going into the military, and that what happened to me was wrong, and that he could help me get out if I enrolled in school. He told me that he immigrated here from South Korea to get out of the war, and that if I truly wanted to go into the military, I could still go 4 years from now. He said, besides, you are only 17 years old. He asked me if I had any friends in college. And I remember an older boy that was on my high school speech and debate team, and he was attending a community college. And so we called him up. My boss told him that we'd give him a pair of Jordans if he came over and talked to us. Over the next 3 hours, they figured out how they were going to get me into college and how to get a scholarship for speech and debate. The next morning, I was at work when the staff sergeant walked into my store and he said that it was illegal for me to skip out of boot camp. Immediately, my boss stepped in. He said, Aaron is only 17 years old. He has a speech and debate scholarship for college, and he works for me. 3 days, my boss, Peter, and I were asked to testify in front of a panel of the highest Marine recruiters in Arizona. I told my story, how I was picked up on the street under the guise that I could explore my options. Considering that I was 17 and my parents had absolutely no idea where I was or what was happening, I was discharged from the Marines. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I would have boarded that shuttle and went to boot camp. Because of this, I flew to a different city in the US every weekend, became a key holder and an assistant manager for a shoe store. I flew to New York 2 weeks after September 11th attacks and saw Ground Zero. I studied art history and poetry interpretation. In March 2001, I performed my poetry in Rome, Italy, and was crowned the International Poetry Interpretation Champion of the world out of hundreds of other college students from all over the globe. I remember looking over Rome from my hotel room with a gigantic trophy in my hand. And I wondered where all the surviving Bernini and Caravaggio works were hiding. We all survived war somehow. I called my parents and told them where I was and that I was coming home.
Wow, Aaron, I was cheering when you got to Rome there in the story. What an unbelievable tale. I can't believe that happened. And even worse, what would have happened had your boss not stepped in and advocated for you. I'm so glad that you did not have to go through that alone. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Our final storyteller of the evening is Katherine Patterson. Katherine has worked in public health for over 10 years. As a former public health analyst under the Obama administration, she worked in the HIV/AIDS Bureau, focusing on a coordinated federal response to the HIV epidemic and increasing access to healthy food and nutrition services to people living with HIV/AIDS. She discovered many of her recipients living with HIV were food insecure or having difficulty getting enough to eat. This led her to convene an interest group to research how food insecurity contributes to the health outcomes. She holds a Master's of Public Health from Wayne State University, and then in 2018 in Tanzania, she met her fiance. They started a hydroponic farm in the capital city of Dar es Salaam. She is in the process of returning overseas to continue her work to create a more equitable and sustainable food system. I can't wait for you to hear more from Katherine.
Let your dreams be bigger than your fears, your actions louder than your words, and your faith stronger than your feelings. After several years of dreaming, contemplation, overcoming fear, in the middle of my career, October 2017, I walked away from a pretty cushy life in Washington, D.C. High salary position, amazing friends, great apartment, to move across the other side of the world to a developing country for 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer, to pursue a passion, a seed I feel God planted, and I have no regrets. The federal office where I work was doing amazing, actually life-saving work, but it wasn't my dream. The seed God planted for me as a food systems change maker is to tackle issues in our food system. And there's so many issues, from food waste to food deserts to families who are food insecure that are lacking access to healthy food environments. So I started doing volunteer work. I worked with farmers and urban farms in DC and Detroit, Michigan, where I'm from. I even took a leave of absence to work in South America with some organic farmers, but it wasn't enough. I was faced with a decision to stay where I was, to walk away from a position and pursue my passion. So fast forward to about 6 months before Peace Corps, I met a woman by chance. Her name is Sarah Marshall, and she was doing international work in food security. And she was a returned Peace Corps volunteer. So she asked me, had I considered Peace Corps? And that was kind of my aha moment. And Sarah's name was also really familiar to me. It wasn't until 2 years later that I realized we were already connected on LinkedIn. My pastor always says there are no coincidences. So I was like, God, you gave me this desire. Please, please, please open the door. So I did interview with Peace Corps July 2017. I remember the interview. I was really excited. And they basically told me they had over 500 applicants and only maybe 200 positions. And they told me, don't get my hopes up. So a month later, August 2017, I received an email saying, congratulations, welcome to Peace Corps Tanzania. And I was like, oh my God, this happened so quickly. And I was excited, but to be honest, I was a bit terrified. So think about all the ways we use water to bathe, to wash our homes, to water our grass, wash dishes. Now imagine not having access to water in your home. Imagine having to either bike or walk 15 minutes to get water and to bring it back to your home. Now imagine going 3 days without water because you're in a region where it's hot. no bathing, no cleaning your home. This was my village, my home for 2 years. So I arrived in my village like eager, excited, like I'm an agriculture volunteer. I'm here to make change. I'm going to change lives. I'm going to impact my community. But one of the things I discovered is I was placed in a village with very little access to water. I thought, what can I do? How can I be successful here? I mean, the farmers I worked with, their farms were dependent on rain. And rain-dependent agriculture is a disaster. So I sat down with my counterpart and some of the leaders in my village, and we came up with projects to address both water and food insecurity. So my favorite project was planting trees. So I worked with the kids in my village and the teachers, and we planted 500 trees. We started a tree nursery, and I learned that trees absorb water from the soil and they take it into the atmosphere, and that increases rainfall. So I was super excited. So the teachers and the kids, we built this tree nursery. It was pretty awesome. Now, the students in my village really had it tough. I mean, they carried water to school every day. Can you imagine small kids in middle school carrying water? Some kids lived about 20, maybe 30 minutes outside of the village. My village was pretty big. So they had it really difficult. And they're carrying water to school to drink, to flush the lavatories, and to clean their hands. So another project we came up with was a rainwater catchment system. So there are two rainy seasons in Tanzania. There's a small rainy season, then there's a large rainy season. So we thought we would build this rainwater catchment system, capture water in tanks during the rainy season to store and to keep throughout the dry season. It sounded great. So I was excited. I went off to Dar to look at materials and write everything down, get my budget together. During that time, I received an email, an alert actually from Peace Corps saying we were being evacuated. And I thought, oh my God, I haven't finished my projects. We were being evacuated and going back home because of a pandemic that we all know too well now as COVID-19. So in May of this year, myself, along with thousands of volunteers all over the world, were evacuated in a mass evacuation, the only evacuation in the history of Peace Corps. So many of us, we went home to a pandemic situation. But not only that, we came home to protest all over the world, protesting rights for people of color. So it was scary times, really scary times. As we struggle against uncontrollable forces, uncomfortable conditions, we're forced to live more deeply and more fully. There are so many things I could talk about my time in Tanzania, from isolation, long periods of isolation, malnutrition that I didn't even anticipate, and loss. One of my closest friends in Peace Corps, her name was Morgan. She was 24 years old and she passed suddenly. It was probably one of the toughest times in my service. But there were also times I looked up and saw shooting stars. I fell asleep, seeing shooting stars everywhere. I experienced the most beautiful people, very little, no electricity, no water in my village, but they were so happy. I saw mountain views on Kilimanjaro that were breathtaking. And I had pineapple that was so sweet, safi sana, it's sweet in Swahili. It's like I was having pineapple for the first time. because of Tanzania, I feel more courageous in life. I left a project that was undone, and so I was determined to come back and try and find a way from Washington, D.C. to fund that project. So I worked with the National Peace Corps Association, and we did a crowdfunding campaign. And it was so inspirational for me because people gave. I mean, some people gave a lot of money. People I didn't even know that I happened to post it out on my network, and people gave to the point that our fundraising, we raised and met our goal. We exceeded our goal 4 weeks before the deadline. So that was probably the most courageous thing I can think of.
Wow, Katherine, thank you. What perspective in your story. And I know that is something that we all need right now. And I love your spirit of gratefulness through it all. And thank you for sharing the story of your faith, of chasing your dream, and your incredible life-saving work. Now we're going to move on to my favorite part of the show, where things get real in the Q&A portion. Remember, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. But I'm going to get the moderator's privilege and start with a question for all of the artists. For all of you, but we'll start with Katherine. The theme tonight is because of this. What key turning point in your story changed how you view the world?
Wow. So many. So there's one story I wanted to share, just really short. So there was one bus going from my village every day, and to my banking town was 2 hours one way. And so I remember waking up at 3 a.m. to catch a 4 a.m. bus. There are bats flying everywhere. Like you literally have to duck, or because there's so many bats. And I remember feeling frustrated, and I'm standing outside, and I'm like, oh my God, can I stay here for 2 years? And then I look up, and I had never seen the sky like this. It was amazing seeing shooting stars, no light pollution. There's so many stars. Like I said, I felt like I saw the sky and stars for the first time. And in that moment, I learned how to live in the moment. There's so many things that can go wrong in our days. So many things that can go wrong and things that can deter us, but living in the moment, experiencing things that we may take for granted, I think is probably one of the biggest takeaways for me.
That's great. I mean, how many of us are at our bus stops right now? Great perspective. Next, Aaron.
For me, it was that moment of seeing those kids with their duffel bags and realizing that I didn't have anything on me, and slowly slinking into that bathroom. If my life would have been very, very different if I would have chose to join the military, and yeah, I'm glad I didn't do it.
I just can't imagine how a couple minutes at 17 years old can change your life. That is.
Yeah, I mean, this all happened in less than 24 hours. Like it's pretty wild, and that's the way they do it. It's like trying to sell a car. They see you on the lot, and they got to close the deal.
Wow, incredible. Chris.
Yeah, I think when that strategy of, oh, I'm gonna hide here in the bathroom was just thrown away from me by like my neighbor and my cousins, just being like, Clorox is really bad. And it kind of gave me a fear I didn't have. And as I kind of show in the story, it's like it opened my eyes to like all the scary things in life. So it really was that understanding of like, you might call it like a loss of innocence, a loss of like protection from like the dangers of the world that happened, at a very, very young age for me, just being like, oh, I got to be careful. Like something's coming for me.
Oh yeah, I definitely can think of so many of those moments in childhood. It's huge.
For sure.
Another question for all of you. Aaron, as you alluded to, your life would have gone a very different direction had you hopped on that bus. Katherine, your life changed when you had that aha moment about the Peace Corps. Chris, when you decided to place fear or backside in its proper place, and not hold you back. What have your stories that you told today taught you about making pivotal life decisions? Let's see, Aaron, let's start with you on this one.
For me, it's really just trying to remember who you are and what your purpose is. And if you don't know what that is yet, that means you're in the time to discover what that is. But it's not for anyone else to decide. It's really for us. We are the curators of our life story, and we get to decide, what choices we make, where we go, where we live, as much as possible, right? And just try to make all your choices feed into that timeline.
That's great about your self-agency. Yeah. Chris.
Yeah, I would say the lesson learned is really just like how much you have to adapt, right? Because if you just get stuck in like, this is the way to do it, you're going to get some obstacle, inevitable. And you're going to like have to switch it up somehow. So I think it makes me think of that great Bruce Lee quote about being water, right? And just understanding that you have to adjust and adapt because life is going to throw something at you, throw something at all of us. So how are you going to respond to that? Are you just going to crumble, or are you going to, bend but not break,
So true. Katherine, I'm sure you know a lot about adapting, but I would love to hear your answer.
I feel like in life we get nudges. It could be, a friend sharing a story or something that comes across your path more than once. That's what I call a nudge. You got to listen to that. Research says that people have more regrets about things they didn't do versus things that they did. So you don't want to look back and think about what if. You want to follow those nudges and listen to your internal voice.
Yes, thank you, Katherine. The next question I have is for Chris. Chris, what a vivid story you told. For those who are still thinking about it, will you tell us what is backside?
Yeah, well, the word itself comes from just like a Jamaican expression that I would hear my grandmother say. Not just my grandmother, but she like primarily would say, and it's just sort of like an exclamation. And so that exclamation that I would hear really resonated with the feeling I was feeling when I was like so deeply afraid. And the fear I had was a fear that really pursues. So it wasn't just like it's scary over there, but it's like the scariness is approaching and like chasing me. And so whenever I would feel that way, it would really like tighten my chest in a way that, the only word that could come to my mind is like backside. Like I'm in real trouble now. Like this is not this is not a joke. This is not a game. And so that's where it sort of like morphed in my understanding of it. And I feel like it's easier for you if you name the evil to get past it, because the evil don't want to be named. So you got to name it so you can get past it.
I love that. I think I'm going to steal it, and people will be wondering why I'm going around saying backside. But many people live in a constant state of fear. Kind of to follow up, what words of advice do you have for someone who is having difficulty overcoming fear?
I would say the difficulty is really, it sounds simple in terms of like facing it, but that's a hard step in and of itself, to get yourself in that place where like once, because obviously now I told it in the story about like my fear of Clorox. I use Clorox all the time to wash clothes. So like at some point it got less scary. But it really had to be about you taking the time to like see like, oh, this thing isn't gonna hurt me in the way I thought it could hurt me, right? And I think that's something, whatever your object of fear is, whatever backside is for you, it's not as bad as you think it is. Because part of like, it may be dangerous legitimately, but like your fear is what gives it that extra like invincibility that it seems to have that it doesn't actually have. So once you face the fear, you're like, is this the thing I was so deathly afraid of? That's an important step. And while it may seem like a first step, it's a hard step to take, but it's a step that leads to freedom for sure.
So good when you step back and realize that that fear doesn't control you anymore. Aaron, we'll go to you next. First, I'd like to reiterate how glad we are that you had someone with you to intercede on your behalf and save you from that experience. Taking yourself back to your 17-year-old self that morning, what do you think made you follow the staff sergeant that morning and grab his coffee and go with him and take that test?
It honestly was just a night's sleep in between. It was the act of kindness, right? He took me home during a summer night and said he'll be back in the morning, and even came before 8 a.m. so I couldn't like duck out or change my plans all of a sudden, like he made sure that, I was there and I was ready to go and do the test. While I was telling my story, my mom texted me even, and she was like, he actually showed up at my work and tried to get me to sign papers while you were taking the test, which is pretty wild. And that's something I didn't really even know about until now. So that's pretty crazy.
Wow, that is wild. I mean,
Yeah.
I was on the edge of my seat as you were telling the story.
Yeah. And she's like having this whole other thing, like putting stuff together, and was like, wait a minute, that guy like tried to come and get me to sign papers, that day, which is pretty wild. Yeah.
Wow.
That's how they work, man. That's how they try to do it.
Crazy. So crazy. Katherine, moving on my last question before we turn it over to audience questions. You left a comfortable life to pursue what you believe God was calling you to do. What would you tell people who may be feeling that nudge, as you said earlier?
Well, I think first, I always pray about things. I believe in divine power. So I seek guidance. And then, we all have fear. We've all encountered it. You have to find a way to sort of push past that fear. And you really have to be courageous. You really have to be courageous. And you're stepping out in faith. And you have to listen to, I had a lot of people telling me things that made sense in a way, like, why would you quit your job? You're making really good money to go to be a volunteer and go without a salary for 2 years. This is not the right time to do this in this current administration. I heard a lot of that. And it really discouraged me, but close friends and family were encouraging. So I say find a support system, and you got to step out in faith. You got to pursue it. Even if it doesn't work out, you can't look back and wonder if.
So good, and kind of a thread of overcoming fear here. So we now have our first question from the audience, and it looks like this is again for Katherine. We have a question from Tracy. Tracy asks, what would you tell people who are thinking about joining the Peace Corps?
What I did initially, even though Sarah Marshall was a returned Peace Corps volunteer and she was super encouraging, she advised me to talk to a few other Peace Corps volunteers that looked like me, because she said everyone's experience is different. So I actually talked to 3 African-American women who had done Peace Corps, and all 3, one had just finished Peace Corps a year before, one was already mid-career like me, and the other person was right out of grad school, and they all overwhelmingly said it was the best thing they could have done. So I would say talk to folks who you share something with either race, ethnicity, gender, and maybe even goals. Like I talked to 2 Peace Corps volunteers that actually did agricultural work, and there are different sectors. So you have education, you have agriculture, environment. There's another one I'm missing. So I would say do your homework. Do your homework and talk to other people. But I really, if you want to talk offline, I would love to talk to more people. And the other thing is there are not a lot of people of color in Peace Corps. So they're trying to reach out and advocate. They're going to HBCUs and talk to, so they're trying to be more diverse. So I really advocate for people of color to consider Peace Corps.
That's great. Well, definitely connect with Katherine after this if you're interested. Another question we have is from Colleen for each of you. And let's see, we'll start with Chris on this one. For each of you, what would you tell other people about sharing your stories and how to choose what you share?
Oh yeah, the choosing is the fun part. Because I definitely, I talked with my wife about a bunch of ideas, and she was like, "What are you talking about? No, that's not a good idea." Like for some of the ones left on the cutting room floor. But I think the beauty of telling your story is that you're giving people like a slice of your life, right? So I didn't know when, I don't even remember how old I was when this story happened. Like I know I wasn't like 5. Like I think I was like a little younger than that, like maybe 4 or 3. But I know that when it happened, it wasn't something like, wow, this is gonna be a good story one day. But when you go through your life now as like an adult or as a young person who's aware, if you just like sort of take that step of like stepping back a little bit from yourself and just try to like watch yourself in something and see like what nuggets can I glean from this that I can share with someone else. Like I was just telling another friend about when I went through like a really bad predicament, and part of me was like, this is gonna be a good story one day. Like even though it was like really bad, like it was still like it wasn't resolved yet, but in my head I was like, there's some good nuggets in this. It's painful right now. It's extremely painful, but there's something to glean from this. So just sort of really being like aware and paying attention and introspective, yes, but also being able to step outside yourself and observe how you're reacting to everything.
That's great, Chris. You can tell you're a true storyteller with that and kind of view your life through a story lens. Let's see, we'll go to Aaron next with that question.
For me, the prompt, because of this, the theme helps. So a lot of times you get writer's block or you don't know what kind of story you're going to tell. Have a friend, throw out a theme or look up The Moth and see what kind of themes they got going on and ask yourself, like, what story would I tell to go with that? This particular story for me that I chose today was just because I didn't want to have to be the person that made the choice because of this. Even though there's the aha moment, like I wanted to have something that I felt kind of like was forced upon me, and then having to like have a resistance through the whole thing. And so that I kind of created like conflict and worked my way out of it. Right. It's a true story, but it comes out when you're starting to think of like storytelling and narrative dynamics, your favorite movies, how do they work and stuff, and really trying to figure out how the story arc works and where you want your powerful lines and where you want people to laugh and think as they hear your story.
So good. And your story had all of that, I could feel the resistance, like you said, and you had some great laugh lines in there too, despite the seriousness of the issue. It's very well done. All right, Katherine.
Chris and Aaron are the professional storytellers. I'm fairly new. I think this is my first, kind of formal storytelling. And I agree with both what Chris and Aaron share. I think having a theme that helps kind of create the platform or for you to collect your thoughts around a theme. And also, I journal. And so I was just looking through my journal recently from Tanzania, like, Oh my God, I have a book here easily. So I think journaling helps as well.
Wow, that's so great. And even just if you're doing it for yourself in your own story, not even sharing, it's so helpful. That's great. Well, we're right here with 1 minute to go. So we are going to leave the audience with recommendations. So each of you share what storytellers, authors, or creators are inspiring you right now. So we'll start with Aaron.
Oh man. So I own a bookstore and I publish. So I read a lot. I'm reading a lot of stuff right now. But I just published a book from a author that worked in a really upscale restaurant. And he wrote a memoir called A Year in Waiting, and it's basically the several months, actually a year before the pandemic started and everyone lost their jobs or were forced to look for other work. And it's answers, it leads up, it asks the questions that we're all thinking right now. Like, am I doing the right thing? Is my industry safe forever? Should I be looking for something else? Is this sustainable? What are my passions? Like, it's all in this book. The guy nails it. Nick Butler is the author, and he actually was a professor at ASU.
How timely. Thanks, Aaron. Katherine.
I'm actually reading an interesting story, a book by an author. She's actually, her and her husband started a farm called Soulfire Farm. And it's really encouraging for young farmers starting out, sort of how to acquire land. I mean, they tell their story from beginning of being residents in New York and how they were having issues accessing healthy eating options. The environment wasn't there. And so they started a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture. And from there, they were able to acquire land. So it's such a great, her name is escaping me, but the name of the farm is in New York. It's called Soulfire Farm, and it's so inspirational. I don't know if maybe Chris has heard of it, but yeah, when I think of her name, I'll share it.
That's great. Thanks, Katherine. Sounds inspiring. Chris, close us out.
Yeah, man. Like I feel like I'm about to say like the shout out, but like it would be remiss of me, proud Davidson alum I am, not to shout out two of my bros, Clint Smith and David Dennis Jr. Man, like I'm very much inspired by their writing, and to go from people who I could sit in the like lunchroom with to now like I'm teaching their poetry and their articles to my students. It's just I'm grateful to be able to do that journey with them. So that's just for the sake of time. I'm just gonna shout those two brothers out, and they're doing tremendous work for sure. Absolutely.
That sounds great. We'll have to look into them. All right. Thank you, Chris, Aaron, and Katherine for inspiring us and intriguing us. And thank you to the ASU Care staff for providing this platform for artists and storytellers. I know it was so much work with the tech and the marketing and all of the back end, so thank you. And thank you to you, the faithful viewers who support this series. You can support ASU Care and help sustain the venue as it creates paid performance opportunities for artists like this. Visit asucare.com and click the Give Now button. Be sure to also join us next month for the 7th installment of Gather, which will take place on Sunday, November 15th. It will be a special one. ASU Care has been invited to collaborate with Scottsdale Public Art and Storytell at their annual Canal Convergence Festival. The theme will be Reconnect. I can tell you right now that you will not want to miss it. Be sure to like ASU Care on Facebook and to stay tuned in for all of their upcoming programming. Have a great rest of your evening and good night.